Okay, let's just shatter a massive economic illusion right out of the gate. Welcome to This Explainer. We're diving into a story about globalization that you probably think you already know. But what happens when hard, undeniable data completely destroys the textbooks?
Think about it. A developing country opens its borders to global trade. What happens? You're probably picturing foreign money flooding in and factories mass-producing cheap goods with cheap labor, right? Well, wrong. The actual data from Colombia's 1991 trade liberalization, it proves the exact shocking opposite.
Here is the absolute brutal reality. Classic economic models basically guaranteed a low-skill boom. That was the conventional wisdom. But Colombia delivered a massive slap in the face to those theories. Instead of a low-skill gold rush, the wage gap between high and low-paid workers literally exploded. And those local firms, they didn't expand, they shrank.
The protection these companies relied on vanished, almost overnight. Average manufacturing tariffs plummeted from a cozy 50% all the way down to a brutal 13%. This single massive drop shook the entire nation's economy to its absolute core. Panic set in.
The textbooks were just completely wrong. Here's the anti-common sense reality we have to wrap our heads around. Firms didn't race to the bottom to compete on price. No, they did the unthinkable. Suddenly, they desperately needed highly skilled white-collar workers. They were frantically trying to climb to the top just to survive. Let's look at the actual mechanism here, because it's fascinating. It triggered this massive domino effect. Step 1, tariffs drop. Step 2, high-quality foreign materials become incredibly cheap. Step 3, domestic firms grab those superior materials to upgrade their own products. And step 4, the real kicker. You simply cannot build high-quality products with low-skill labor. You need smart, expensive workers.
So it wasn't just about exporting more stuff. The real storm happened deep inside local factories. It was an absolute supply chain storm. Firms were forced to fundamentally rewire how they built things from the ground up.
Take the chemical sector, for example. These firms were forced to make terrifying choices. They just couldn't get away with producing basic chemicals anymore. They had to scramble to hit higher quality peaks, simply because their competitors suddenly had access to superior foreign inputs. It was adapt or die.
And it definitely wasn't just the advanced sectors feeling the heat. Even in machinery, a space where Colombia had a massive comparative disadvantage, firms were pushed to drastically upgrade their output quality. Level up or die. Literally, those were the only options left on the table.
This created what researchers mapped as a contagious butterfly effect across the entire country. As direct importers brought in better materials and upgraded their goods, that pressure trickled all the way down the line. Even local mom-and-pop shops had to start using these better local materials just to stay relevant.
61%. The clear majority of the entire chemical sector had to pivot aggressively. They weren't just hiring warm bodies. They intensely shifted their payrolls towards smarter, higher-paid workers who could actually handle complex production.
And here's where the data gets absolutely mind-blowing. 14%. That's the percentage of domestic firms that never even traded globally. They didn't export, they didn't import a single thing. But guess what? They still had to upskill just to survive the local supply chain storm. The free trade shock found them anyway. No one was safe.
This is where the paradox becomes undeniably clear. Sales actually shrank by an average of 14% as foreign competition flooded the market. Yet skill intensity rose from 28% to 35%. Think about that. They were making less money, but were forced to hire more expensive talent.
You think that's extreme? Machinery sales crashed by an incredible 34%. Over a third of their market share just wiped out. Yet skill intensity in that sector still climbed from 19% to 25%. They were bleeding revenue, but doubling down on quality. It totally defies basic logic.
Because better quality didn't magically mean record margins. It meant brutal competition and shrinking profits. Industry associations violently opposed this free trade move back in 1991. They fought it tooth and nail. And when you look at crashing sales and rising payroll costs, it is glaringly obvious exactly why they were terrified.
Now, the researchers behind this data really pulled off a masterclass in economic logic. They successfully mapped the unseen web of supply chains. They proved exactly how a few importing firms passed the pressure down, solving a skill puzzle that has literally baffled academics for decades. But, and this is a big but, the model had a fatal flaw. As brilliant as the architecture of this study is, we have to critically expose where the math failed reality. Models are only as good as their assumptions, right?
And this study missed a massive, critical variable.
The authors assumed wages wouldn't budge. They basically assumed there was an infinite pool of highly skilled workers just waiting to be hired at the exact same price. I mean, come on. This assumption grossly underestimated the absolute chaos that was actually unfolding in the real labor market.
The ultimate irony? In reality, the wage gap between skilled and unskilled workers exploded by 12%. The demand for smart labor was infinitely more ferocious than the academic model captured. It wasn't a neat, tidy transition. It was a nationwide, cutthroat bidding war.
Which brings us to a final, really uncomfortable thought. If free trade forces an entire nation to upskill, if it forces everyone to make better products, while simultaneously shrinking local sales and sparking a brutal war for talent, who actually wins in the long run? It's really time to rethink everything you've been told about globalization, because those textbooks, they definitely need a rewrite.